What's going on, everybody? Theo Gremminger, player profiler. We're constantly looking for edges that can help us win this season in fantasy football. And while your league mates are trying to figure out the rankings for each and every position, we're going to take a step back and we're going to dive even deeper. We're going to look into the handcuff running back rankings. Now, we're really looking at the number 2 back in ADP right now, average draft position for the number 2 running back on every single NFL team. So for some of these players, you're going to be able to plug them right into your lineups. For some of these players, these are stashes, guys that if someone gets injured or if somebody plays poorly, the next man in will be the guy that you have on your bench. And when we look back at last season, who's a player that stands out as one of the biggest steals in fantasy football? That was Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams was getting drafted last summer in like the 18th or 19th round. Some leagues, he was a waiver wire addition. Knowing about these specific players now is going to help you win when the games get started this season. We're going to be ahead of the waiver wire on some of these guys, and some of these other guys are going to have to be part of your draft plan. Now, we're going to classify these guys into different categories. Some players are a Handcuff Plus. That's a player that you can use pretty much every week, or at least on bye weeks and in weeks you're getting to a jam. Other backs are kind of ridiculous to even have on this list. A guy like David Montgomery will be on this list because he's the number 2 back in ADP on the Detroit Lions behind Jahmyr Gibbs. Raheem Mostert would fall into this category as a player who was super productive last year, but has to make this list because we're talking number 2 running backs. Other players might be a specialist, a guy who might be a pass catching back, but if he gets his opportunity with an injury in front of him, could be a guy that could be really helpful to have on our lineup. Then we have other backfields we probably want to stay away from because even if there's an injury, it looks like a committee. So let's dive into it. This is your handcuff running back ranking list. We're going to start in reverse order. So this is the backfield that I'm sort of least interested in right now, and that's at number 32. We're talking about the Indianapolis Colts. I think that there's a direct handcuff in this mix of players, meaning if Jonathan Taylor goes down, I think one of these players, Trey Sermon, Evan Hull, or Tyler Goodson, would see a nice sized role. The problem is in June, right now, we don't know which one that would be. This is one of the biggest paradoxes in fantasy football. Jonathan Taylor should be one of the highest drafted running backs in all of fantasy. He's going in the early second round on Underdog, on FFPC, pretty much anywhere that's drafting right now. And he's expected to get a ton of volume. But he's got an unclear situation with the back behind him. Trey Sermon right now is probably the leader. Never been a guy that's been very successful in his NFL career. The player that I would have in mind would be Evan Hull. If Evan Hull can come out of this situation, he's interesting. Big-time athlete out of Northwestern, didn't play last year, struggled with injuries, but he's back this year. This is a guy that athletically checks off a lot of boxes. But right now, this is a backfield we can sort of ignore. '31 is the Kansas City Chiefs, and that's because it's Clyde Edwards-Helaire. This is one of the offenses that I would expect to be one of the best in football. They are loaded at the receiver position. Kansas City went and made changes this offseason to get Xavier Worthy. They made a free agent signing of Hollywood Brown. Rashee Rice, when on the field, is going to be extremely effective, and Travis Kelce's still there with Patrick Mahomes. We also really like Isaiah Pacheco this year, a strong target in the third round of drafts. But right now, Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a direct handcuff, not something that I'm super interested in. But anyone who has an opportunity in the Kansas City backfield would be someone we probably would have to put into our fantasy football lineups. So we cannot ignore CEH. Keep an eye on the other backs on the roster, though. Keontae Ingram and Deneric Prince are both going to be competing in camp. But right now, it's CEH at our 31st ranked running back. Number 30, and this player could probably be higher up the list, But again, I see a little bit of competition in this backfield, and that is Elijah Mitchell at number 30 from the San Francisco 49ers. Some people are going to watch this video and say Elijah Mitchell should be somewhere in the teens. He's backing up Christian McCaffrey. This is a plus offense. But I do wonder this year with Isaac Guerendo and Cody Schrader both in the mix as rookies, as well as Jordan Mason still on the roster, that maybe this is a little bit unsettled. But if we do see Elijah Mitchell separate himself from this group, he would rise up these rankings. Now, at number 29 is a player that I'm really, really excited about, and that's Will Shipley of the Philadelphia Eagles. This has been a player that I have prioritized in my dynasty leagues, but I think he's going to be a factor in redraft as well. The issue with Shipley and why he's ranked this low in our rankings is because of the presence of Kenny Gainwell. Kenny Gainwell has continually been a Nick Sirianni favorite over the years and has always mixed in. Last year, he even started the year ahead of DeAndre Swift in that first game of the year. So Kenny Gainwell, I think, would make this a little bit of a headache. But let's say that something bad happened and Saquon missed time. I think it would be a split at first, but Will Shipley would separate himself. Shipley was a big-time receiver at Clemson, also is an athletic running back who was a Clemson on the field early in his Clemson career, very productive runner-receiver combination, had an outstanding pro day, and Philadelphia drafted him. So Will Shipley, much like Elijah Mitchell, if we would see a clear separation between him and the number 3 back, Kenny Gainwell, he would be higher up this list. But for now, we've got to pump the brakes, even though I really like the talent profile. And another player that I think is going to gain value this summer is Braylon Allen. I'm not sure if this would be a direct handcuff or a committee backfield, though. Braylon Allen was a player that we were very hopeful for at Player Profiler, but then he fell to the 4th round of the NFL draft. Not only did he fall to day 3, but he landed behind Breece Hall, one of the best running backs in football, the number 2 PPR running back last year in Breece Hall. So Braylon Allen falls to the Jets. Okay, we can deal with that. But then the Jets went and doubled down drafting Isaiah Davis, and we've still got Israel Abanikanda on the roster. So Braylon Allen has the early buzz in camp. The Jets media seems to think it's Braylon Allen and seems to think Braylon Allen could have a weekly role. But until we have a little bit of clarity on that, we're going to keep him down here in the rankings. But this is a guy who could rise up this summer. Braylon Allen is a big, strong running back. Expect him to play around 240 pounds this year. Very productive player at Wisconsin. And we think this Jets offense is going to be much improved with Aaron Rodgers behind center. Number 27, and this is Alexander Mattison. Mattison last year was a disaster of a draft pick. Mattison rose up into like round 6, a dead zone wasteland running back. Guy was steamed up all summer long. This was sort of a next man in behind Dalvin Cook. Ended up having really no fantasy production to speak of, and was a disaster of a pick for fantasy managers who drafted him where they did. But now Alexander Mattison goes from like the 6th round to the 18th round. And now he's backing up Zamir White. And I think Zamir White is going to be a very useful pick this year. Zamir White going around the 6-7 turn in early redraft leagues. And Zamir White certainly looked really good last year in his 4-game sample size, but it's that. Zamir White really has only been a significant player for about 4 games of his NFL career. So we are projecting Zamir White to take a massive step forward, but Alexander Mattison could have some use behind Zamir White if Zamir White is unable to handle this new role. Think of Mattison more as a guy you might be able to get a couple of spot starts from. Obviously not a huge high ceiling type player for you, but throughout his career, Mattison has had a lot of usefulness when he was in this role. When Dalvin Cook missed time, Alexander Mattison would step in and give us weekly RB2 production. It was just sort of a set your clocks to it. He rarely did it for more than 1 week at a time, but he was still capable of doing it. Keep an eye on Dylan Lobby. Dylan Lobby, drafted out of New Hampshire, late day 3 selection, but a tremendous receiving back. He could leap past Alexander Mattison and be the one you wanted off the waiver wire if Zamir White was going to miss time. But I still think even if Lobby was getting a lot of work in the passing game, Mattison would still handle some kids. This is an interesting backfield to keep an eye on because of Zamir White being, despite a guy that we're going to take some shots on, a guy with some question marks as to the amount of volume he can handle in a long-term situation. Moving up to number 26 overall, and this is a player who was also a disaster last year, and that was Tank Bigsby. Bigsby was a third-round draft pick out of Auburn. Bigsby had a lot of like fantasy managers betting on him as a priority handcuff in redraft leagues behind Travis Etienne last year. Of course, Travis Etienne gave us a top 3 finish in PPR scoring, and Tank's Bigsby was non-existent. He couldn't even beat out Dearness Johnson for playing time last year. But the coaching staff, there's been nothing but sort of positive vibes from Bigsby this offseason. They seem to be a little more interested in talking him up, and there seems to be a little bit more of a comfort level with this coaching staff with Bigsby as the handcuff running back to Travis Etienne. And they did nothing this offseason to tell us differently. They didn't bring in anyone significant as a free agent, and they didn't draft a running back. So right now, Tank Bigsby, year 2, third-round pick out of Auburn, lost rookie season, but this could be a player where if Travis Etienne went down, he could be a priority waiver wire pickup. So if I'm drafting Travis Etienne and I like the look of my team, I don't mind handcuffing with Bigsby because I can draft Etienne in like the 3rd round, and then I can draft Bigsby in like round 19. So it's not a whole lot of cost to me to cuff Travis Etienne at this point. And he does seem sort of like a direct handcuff. Bigsby was a solid receiver at Auburn as well. So a two-way skill set would seem to be the direct handcuff to Etienne. And that's an offense that I think is going to be improved this year. Number 25. This is a player that I'm excited about, and that's Tyrone Tracy of the New York Giants. I am a Tyrone Tracy truther. This is a player who was a wide receiver at Iowa, transfers to Purdue, has 1 season of RB production in the Big Ten and looked pretty good doing it, is a big-time athlete in sort of the mold of an Antonio Gibson type athlete, and lands on New York behind Devin Singletary. And Devin Singletary is a Brian Daboll favorite, played for him in Buffalo, is absolutely the starting running back in New York. Don't get it twisted on this one. It's Singletary's backfield, but Singletary has never been able to handle a ton of volume. He's always been a back that has mixed in with another back, whether it was his time in Buffalo or even Houston last year, where beginning of the year it was sort of Dameon Pierce, and then they gave Singletary a ton of volume to sort of end the season. So I'm looking at the backup running backs in New York as a potential source of contingent upside. We also have the fact that New York, besides Malik Neighbors and probably Wan'Dale Robinson, don't have a lot of guys who have guaranteed weekly usage at any position. So the running backs, I think, will be featured a little bit more than some might imagine. So I'm going to bet on Tyrone Tracy, but there is a chance that Eric Gray could be ahead of him. Eric Gray is a second-year back, a lot less juice athletically than Tracy, but also a guy who was a big-time pass catcher at Oklahoma. So I'm on Tracy. It could be Eric Gray. This is an underrated backup situation because of the non-bell cow status of Devin Singletary. Now, number 24 is, for me, it's Keaton Mitchell, and he's going undrafted because we don't know when he's going to be back. You could sort of change this ranking to your favorite Baltimore running back. I wrote this article. Basically, the video I'm doing was an article on Player Profiler. A couple of people pushed back to me that I should have had a different Ravens running back listed. But for me, Keaton Mitchell is one where Baltimore, the coaching staff, the general manager, they all seem to really like Keaton Mitchell. Eric DeCosta has pointed out that Mitchell will be back this year, despite his injury status kind of being an unknown as to when. I don't think he'll be available for week 1. he also has a capped touch ceiling where this is a very small back. We're talking about sub 190-pound running back. But Mitchell had 3 RB2 or better weeks in only 8 games played last year. This is an incredibly explosive, fast player. And the Todd Monken offense, again, he had 3 RB24 or better weeks in only 8 games played last year. And for me, that's the difference with how I view Keaton Mitchell as a more valuable player than potentially a Justice Hill or a Rasheen Ali. But if you believe in Justice Hill or Rasheen Ali, they certainly will have an opportunity to impress with Keaton Mitchell sidelined. So we're going to call this number 24 your favorite Baltimore running back. For me, it's Mitchell, but I can understand if you disagree with this one. Number 23 for me, this is a player that is absolutely going to be a Handcuff Plus because he can really catch the football. So we talk about Handcuff Plus. A Handcuff Plus, there's going to be varying levels of usage. Some guys might be a guy where you're getting, 8 to 10 PPR points. Some guys might be a guy who have a little bit more spike week potential as a Handcuff Plus. But I think when the Tampa Bay Buccaneers drafted Bucky Irving in round 4, they were basically telling us that they want to work him in and make him part of the weekly offense. Rachaad White had a ton of touches last year. He ranked in the top 5 for running backs in carries, and also he was way up there in targets. Dave Canales' offense continually featured Rachaad White. But I think by bringing in Bucky Irving, a player who led all of college football in receptions last year at the running back position at Oregon, they're saying that they want to work somebody else in. I don't think this should make you think, I don't want to draft Rachaad White. But I think this should make you think that if I draft Rachaad White and I can get Bucky Irving for cheap, I certainly want to do that. And if you're a dynasty manager watching this right now, you really want to have Bucky Irving on your Rachaad White rosters, because I think Bucky Irving is certainly a lot more talented than the backs behind Rachaad White were last year. Now, Sean Tucker is still there, and the coaching staff has talked up Sean Tucker a little bit this offseason, but I really think it's Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving is a guy that I have liked to draft in best ball drafts. I have a significant amount of in Dynasty, but I think in redraft, he's an interesting one, because if Rachaad White were to miss time, I think Bucky Irving could be a guy that's going to be like a low-end RB2, but with his receiving upside, if the game flow is in the right spot and the Bucs are trailing, Irving could be a guy that gets you 15 or so points on the week. So Irving, again, can really catch the football. We say that about a lot of running backs, but just pop the tape in, sort of the Oregon offense where there was a lot of passes behind the line of scrimmage. Bucky Irving was a dynamic player with the ball in his hands and when he could get out in space. Now, number 22 for me, this is already sort of significant because this I'm going to call a committee that could also be a direct handcuff situation. So I think it will be a split backfield even when we get to the beginning of the season. But Gus Edwards already a little bit banged up. So J.K. Dobbins or Kamani Vidal at number 22, depending on which way you lean. Dobbins has been a guy with familiarity with Greg Roman. Obviously played for A. Harbaugh in Baltimore, now plays for A. Harbaugh in Los Angeles. Kamani Vidal is everyone's favorite 6th-round pick. Kamani Vidal, of course, out of Troy, was extremely productive running back in college and didn't have the draft capital, but landed really, really well. So Gus Edwards is going to be the starter there. I don't buy into Gus not getting the first opportunities. Gus was running back 26 last year on the season. Gus had 13 rushing touchdowns. And Gus, of course, has familiarity with Greg Roman. But I do think that Gus has never been a guy who's been dominating the carries. I believe he's never crossed 200 carries at any point of his career. The next man in here is an interesting one. So whether it's Dobbins, whether it's Vidal, this is your choice. A lot of people on Kamani Vidal. But I do think if J.K. Dobbins is healthy, and that's a big if, he might kind of be cooked. If he is healthy, I think this is an interesting one because of his familiarity with Greg Roman. But Kamani Vidal can absolutely be part of your draft strategy as well. this is sort of a bet against Gus Edwards being able to be different this late in his career and be, all of a sudden become like a 280 carry type guy. But one thing is for sure, the Los Angeles Chargers are going to run the football. Everything they've done this offseason has indicated that they want to be a physical running team. We want to take shots on this backfield. Up to number 21, and this is one where I don't love ranking him this highly, but it's Dameon Pierce. And Dameon Pierce in Houston, this is a plus offense. This is a player that had a RB20 finish as a rookie, had 930 rushing yards and 12.9 points per game. Then last year sort of fell off the face of the earth. The new coaching staff did not really seem to want to use Dameon Pierce. Pierce, of course, gets banged up. Devin Singletary is the next man in, and all of a sudden Pierce is like forgotten. But Houston didn't really do anything to challenge Pierce this year. It's Joe Mixon as the clear cut. Make no mistake about it. Joe Mixon's the starter. Joe Mixon is a guy you can target this year. But Dameon Pierce right now as a sort of direct handcuff is one that's going to be interesting. I think Jawar Jordan is one to keep an eye on, though. This is a rookie out of Louisville, was a late draft pick for them. But if this coaching staff is off of Dameon Pierce, Jordan could be an interesting one. But right now, we're going to consider Dameon Pierce to be a direct handcuff in Houston. The offense in Houston is going to score a lot of points. That's why I have Dameon Pierce at 21 overall. Now, number 20 overall for me is Chuba Hubbard. Hubbard feasted last year on volume, and also Miles Sanders was just really bad. Hubbard posted like career high numbers in every category, had 900 yards rushing, had 39 catches, but then Carolina went out and drafted Jonathan Brooks. So it's probably all she wrote for Chuba Hubbard, but he's still an interesting player because Jonathan Brooks, of course, is coming off of a major injury. We are expecting Jonathan Brooks to recover with an opportunity to start in week 1. But if he's slow out the gate, Chuba Hubbard could be a player that could do what he did last year, absorb volume and give you like an RB2/RB3 production on a weekly basis. But he's very much a direct handcuff when Brooks is there. Brooks is the real deal. And we also have Dave Canales in town, who, like we talked about with Rachaad White, really, really gives his RB1 a lot of touches. Now, at number 19, we start getting into running backs that I'm very, very interested in. And number 19 for me is a guy who I've made a priority pick in many of my drafts, whether this is Dynasty, redraft, or best ball. And that's Jaleel McLaughlin. I'm going to call him a Handcuff Plus right away because I think that Jaleel McLaughlin, regardless of Javonte Williams' status, is going to have weekly touches. He reminds me a little bit of Jaylen Warren at this time last year. He was an undrafted free agent out of Youngstown State last year, averaged 5.4 yards per carry, and also caught 31 passes in his rookie season. We saw Javonte Williams' yards per carry fall to a career low 3.5 last year. That's bad. So I think that Javonte Williams' hold on this backfield is tenuous. So there's many scenarios where McLaughlin could pay off if you draft him. There's a chance that this is a split backfield, but McLaughlin is getting enough receiving work that he's a guy you can, keep on your bench, use on bye weeks. But then the contingent upside for McLaughlin, if Javonte Williams were to miss time or be demoted, is strong. McLaughlin is a smaller back, so there's always going to be somebody mixed in. But McLaughlin is also a very talented player who could thrive on high-value touches this year. We also need to keep an eye on rookies Audric Estime and Blake Watson out of Memphis. Watson, another undrafted free agent. I think that there is a real competition here in Denver, and I think the market is completely treating this as Javonte Williams is back, Javonte Williams is healthy, it's just Javonte time. For me, give me all the Jaleel McLaughlin. I'm able to get him in the second half of drafts, meaning like round 13 in FFPC. In best ball, he's cheap. And I think this is a guy that is going to catch a lot of balls. I think he's dynamic, and I think he's going to absolutely pay off at ADP. Now, the question is, can he be a guy that finishes like an RB2? I'm not sure, but I think that there's going to be pathways for him to be viable. Talk about Bo Nix. Bo Nix, we talked about Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving leading the nation in running back receptions, a lot of running back screens. If they want to keep the pressure off of their young rookie quarterback, what better way than to utilize low ADOT, high percentage passing looks to a player like Jaleel McLaughlin? Give me all the Jaleel McLaughlin I can this season. He's my number 19 player on this list. Number 18 for me is Roschon Johnson. Roschon Johnson, of course, is a Chicago Bear, 4th-round pick last year out of Texas. The problem with Roschon is not the Bears' offense. The Bears' offense is going to be good this year. I think Caleb Williams is going to step in and be productive right away. Fantastic receivers there. Of course, DeAndre Swift is going to get the first crack. Big free agent signing for them at the running back position. But Roschon Johnson and Khalil Herbert are both players that are interesting. Now, would this be a committee backfield if DeAndre Swift misses time? Is this a committee backfield every week, regardless of DeAndre Swift being healthy or not? Is this a everybody kind of rotates in type deal? But what's interesting to me is Roschon Johnson is a like-for-like replacement with Swift because Roschon can do a lot of the things as a pass catcher that Swift can. Herbert, very, very talented running the ball, but leaves a lot to be desired as a receiver. So for me, I will lean Roschon Johnson, but this is also a backfield that could be a committee, even if we lose one running back like Swift. But Roschon's a guy who's cheap right now, sort of a post-hype guy, where last year people were sort of drafting him thinking he could make more of a rookie year impact than he did. I will take some shots this year, certainly if I want access to Chicago, and certainly if I want to get a handcuff for DeAndre Swift. I'm looking at Roschon because of his pass catching ability. Now, we're talking about some players that I'm actually getting really excited about when we get higher up on this list. Number 17 for me is Ty Chandler, and I'm going to call him a Handcuff Plus every single week. Ty Chandler has been a best ball and redraft target of mine, and for good reason, because he ended the year with a very promising note last year. He filled in for Alexander Madison, and he flashed big-time two-way ability. Aaron Jones signs as a free agent this year, sort of ending the dream of dynasty managers who thought maybe Ty Chandler would just get the starting role. But Aaron Jones signs as a free agent. But let's backtrack. Aaron Jones is 29 years old, not a volume hog, and played 12 games last year. There's a lot of recency bias on Aaron Jones because he looked fantastic in the NFL playoffs. But that was a 2-game sample size. Aaron Jones certainly shredded the Dallas Cowboys. But what Aaron Jones did last year against the Dallas Cowboys is not going to help your fantasy team this year. Ty Chandler has contingent upside, and I think Ty Chandler is a guy who is going to be a Handcuff Plus that is going to have weekly touches in this offense. If he can keep the momentum from last season, I think you'll see him right out the gate getting touches. And I think he would be an every week RB2 if Aaron Jones were to miss time. Number 16, this is unfortunately a split backfield right now, but Rico Dowdle is listed as the number 2 running back in Dallas behind Zeke Elliott. Zeke Elliott is 29. Rico Dowdle is 25. Rico Dowdle played behind Tony Pollard last year, had some games where he looked pretty good. Dowdle would be the next man in if Zeke were to miss time. Now, do I think that this is going to be a split to start the year? Probably to some extent. I don't think Zeke can handle it all, but Zeke did have 230 touches last year, and I think Zeke is going to have the goal line work. Zeke is probably going to catch some passes out of the backfield. The argument for Dowdle is Zeke going to eventually hit a wall and sort of regress? Can he handle it at age 29? And also, can he hold up at age 29? This is an offense where both running backs are cheap. You can potentially take shots on both, but Dowdle is cheaper right now, certainly in best ball. And in Dynasty, Dowdle is super cheap. I don't think Dowdle is a long-term type play for Dallas, but I think there is a chance that you get weekly starts out of Dowdle. And this is an offense that, again, we expect to score some points. I know there's some offensive line concerns, but I think they'll figure that out. And of course, with Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, this is going to be an offense who is going to have trips to the red zone. and score some points. So this is a backfield to take some shots on. Rico Dowdle at running back at number 16 on this list. Now we get into our top 15. Number 15 for me, absolutely a handcuff plus. Antonio Gibson signs with New England as a free agent from Washington, and I think he's going to have an opportunity to contribute right away. I think this is an offense that's going to feature their running backs, a lot of youth at the wide receiver position with guys like Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, Demario Douglas, and certainly some question marks at the quarterback position. It's going to be Jacoby Brissett and Drake May. When does Drake May take over? I'm not sure. I think we'll see it early in the year. But regardless, an offensive game plan will be getting Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson involved. Gibson was signed early in free agency by New England. And last year, Gibson quietly had his most productive season ever as a pass catcher. In the Eric Bieniemy offense, he finished with 48 receptions. He's never finished lower than running back 41 in any season, and he has 29 career touchdowns. So you have the lack of wide receivers that are established. You have uncertainty at the quarterback position, means I think that they're going to lean on their running backs. Now, Ramondre Stevenson will be the one to carry the load as a runner, but I do think Antonio Gibson has a very high ceiling contingent-wise, where I think that if Ramondre Stevenson missed time, Gibson would be a guy that would be like a top 15 play every week at the position. I believe that they're going to use these running backs in the passing game. Antonio Gibson has the juice as a receiver, and also, again, a better runner than his stats indicated from last year. Last year, he sort of lost the faith of Ron Rivera and that coaching staff as a runner, but he could regain that in New England. That's why I have him at 15 overall. Now, 14 overall for me, another guy I would qualify as like sort of a handcuff plus, but you can call him a direct handcuff if you'd like, and that's Kendre Miller. Kendre Miller was a third-round pick in 2023 out of TCU, and I think he's going to take a big step forward in year two. The Saints offense needs consistent playmakers, and there are opportunities for players to step up sort of behind Chris Olave and Alvin Kamara. Miller has size. He has ability to earn weekly touches. And if the 29-year-old Alvin Kamara were to miss time, Miller would be a high-end weekly RB2. The reason that I rank him at like 14 and not like 8 or 9 is because the presence of Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill is a Swiss Army knife type who's going to play running back, tight end, and line up behind center. So even if Kamara were to miss time, I still think Taysom Hill would sort of cap the ceiling of Kendre Miller, but I'm still very interested in drafting Kendre Miller, having exposure to Kendre Miller in all formats this season. And I think if we take a step back, if Kendre Miller would have been in this draft class, this is a guy who I think would have been drafted on day 2, and there'd probably be more steam regarding Kendre Miller than him being a year 2 NFL player. So it's sort of we've already seen it, and I'd rather take a shot on this sort of unknown situation. Kendre Miller has unknown upside this year and could be a guy that's going to be a helpful player to us over a decent period of time. His situation sort of reminds me a lot of those number of year 2 backs last year who all finished inside of RB2 land. Number 13 on this list, easy one, direct handcuff. Don't get it twisted. This is not going to be the Arthur Smith show where Bijan Robinson's weekly touches are unpredictable. This is going to be Bijan Robinson being treated like Todd Gurley and being treated like a real bell cow, a Christian McCaffrey, a Todd Gurley, a guy with predictable weekly usage. But the next man in is Tyler Algier. The only other running back of note is Jace McClellan out of Alabama, who Atlanta drafted on day 3. Tyler Algier, of course, had 1,000 rushing yards as a rookie, finished with 1,035 yards in that 2022 season under Arthur Smith. So I think that if Robinson were to miss time, Algier would be a plug and play every week starter. But right now he's a direct handcuff. So you're looking to take shots with Algier as an upside handcuff. If Bijan Robinson were to miss time, you plug him in. If Bijan Robinson is playing, you never think about putting him in. And if you're drafting a Bijan Robinson, let's say it's a anchor RB, a hero RB build, you can consider cuffing with Algier just because it's a very expected usage if Bijan were to miss time. Finally, into our top 12. Ray Davis comes in at 12 overall. This is a player that I'm very excited about. Buffalo, we knew that they were going to invest in a running back this offseason. And they selected Ray Davis in the 4th round of the NFL draft. And this was just like a perfect fit. He rushed for 1,000 yards in back-to-back SEC seasons. And he finished 2023 with a whopping 21 touchdowns. He's exactly what we want in a handcuff. He's a like-for-like replacement for James Cook if Cook were to miss time. Davis could also be in like a Latavius Murray goal line and short yardage work early in the season. So I would call him a direct handcuff, but I would say that he has touchdown upside, where there's a chance that he has high-value touches right around the goal line. And then, of course, if James Cook misses time, Ray Davis would be like a weekly top 15 play at the position. Very, very interesting player and a really, really nice landing. Number 11 for me, and this is a player that I maybe am a little too low on, and that's Jerome Ford. And the reason that I say I'm a little too low on him is I think that if we find out that Nick Chubb is having setbacks and is unable to get sort of back on the field during training camp, and his timeline for returning to an NFL field is a little longer than expected, then I think Jerome Ford would vault up not only this ranking, but he probably wouldn't even be eligible for this ranking because he would end up being immediately a starter. He finished as running back 25 in PPR points per game last season. He filled in admirably for Chubb when Chubb went down with an injury. Ford had 1,100 total yards, and he had 9 touchdowns. Very strong receiver, very explosive player. So this is, again, Jerome Ford, I have him ranked 11th, but he would be a guy that I would be very interested in having on as many rosters as possible. Deonta Foreman is there, so I do think that there's a chance that Foreman could be like a little bit more annoying, but at the end of the day, Ford can catch the football. Ford is the explosive player, and in this new Ken Dorsey offense, I think they're going to put a premium on explosive plays and be aggressive this year in Cleveland. Number 10 for me is this one really is a split backfield. I listed Brian Robinson in the article, but it really should have been Austin Eckler. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to flip the script. It's Austin Eckler coming in at number 10. Eckler is a player that I have trouble really believing in, but I do think that he was brought in to catch balls in Washington, and he's a veteran presence with a young rookie quarterback. Jaden Daniels doesn't really seem like a check down artist, but I do think this could be a safety valve type player where if Brian Robinson were to miss time, I think Eckler would be a guy who could be give you just enough as a runner and then also could provide his usual safety valve as a receiver. What's also interesting is when you look at the receiving options on Washington, they're breaking in a lot of youth. You have Luke McCaffrey, you have Ben Sinnott, and then certainly Terry McLaurin, F1, and Jahan Dotson, hopefully a bounce back, but still some lack of clarity in terms of who's getting weekly targets. So I think Eckler, despite the fact that he looked cooked last year, could end up being a useful player. And again, Brian Robinson would be the one that I would bet on in this offense. I'm going to bet on the 25-year-old over the 29-year-old, but Austin Eckler is one that certainly will make this top 10 for me begrudgingly. I think later in the summer, he's a guy that I don't think has a whole lot of upside on this list, but makes a little bit of sense to have him here. Now, we're finally into our top 10, and number 9 is Zach Charbonnet. And this is one that I could have had a little bit higher. Charbonnet, of course, was a 2023 second-round pick. And he's in a tricky position because he's next to Ken Walker. But as a rookie, there were some signs that Charbonnet's one that we really want to have exposure to. He was the more efficient runner. He ran for 4.3 yards per carry versus 4.1 for Walker. And he led Seattle running backs with 33 receptions. Walker, of course, dominated the rushing opportunities. He doubled them up. It was like 219 to 108. But now you have a new coaching staff in town, and we could see those numbers shift. The Ryan Grubb offense should be a pass-happy one, and Charbonnet could be a major beneficiary. This ranking could look low early on in the season, too. Like, there's a chance that Charbonnet just immediately this becomes a little bit more of a split than there was last year. And Ken Walker's never going to be a guy that is going to be completely phased out. He's a very good running back and a very explosive running back. But if Zach Charbonnet wins on the goal line and Zach Charbonnet is being used in the passing game, those are high value touches. So Charbonnet absolutely makes my top 10. Number 8 overall for me, Chase Brown. Chase Brown, I would qualify as a Handcuff Plus. I am maybe a little bit irrationally high on Chase Brown, but this is a player and a situation that I'm willing to push the chips in on. Zach Moss will sort of lead the Bengals backfield, but he's never caught more than 27 passes in any season of his career. And before last year, Moss was never one that we thought could really hold anyone back. Moss was certainly very effective in Indianapolis, but Chase Brown would be the back that not only I think you should roster as a Handcuff Plus, but he would be on the back that I would bet as a chance to lead Cincinnati in running back production. Brown will be a weekly contributor in the passing game. This is an offense that's continually used running backs in the receiving game with Joe Burrow behind center. Think Joe Mixon. Think Samaje Perine. Chase Brown can be a high-value touch upside player, and he could be like a 2023 Jalen Warren or more. Chase Brown has RB2 potential, and you're getting him as the second running back being drafted on Cincinnati. Number 7. 6 and 7 are really fun. Actually, 5, 6, 7. I have 3 straight rookies. And number 7 overall is a player that I have as one of my most exposed players in Dynasty. I have a ton of him in best ball and actually just took him in a redraft league as well recently, and that's Marshawn Lloyd. Marshawn Lloyd could be ranked higher on this list. The Packers tend to use 2 running backs every single week under LaFleur. And despite Josh Jacobs' presence, Lloyd is going to provide you weekly utility. He is an explosive, fast running back with receiving skills. Add in the fact that we expect him to get weekly touches. Add in the fact that we think Green Bay is going to score a lot of points. I really like Marshawn Lloyd this year. Lloyd would be a weekly RB1 if Josh Jacobs were to miss time. So unlike some of the guys below him on this list, where we talked about them maybe giving you RB2 value, Lloyd would be an RB1 if Josh Jacobs were to miss time. And for you dynasty managers out there, Marshawn Lloyd has a pathway to being the number 1 back in 2025 on an offense that we view as ascending with Jordan Love. Number 6, Trey Benson. Trey Benson, this ranking might seem aggressive, but Arizona's offense is ascending. Trey Benson also plays behind a 29-year-old in James Conner. James Conner has never played an entire season. There's potential that like Benson is going to make this a split immediately. You think about sort of a Jahmyr Gibbs, De'Von Achane light role where Benson is used on explosive plays. Benson's used in the passing game. Benson is mixed in maybe every 2 series. And I think Benson is going to keep cutting into Connor's job until he takes it over. Split backfield right away, direct handcuff / handcuff plus. And then as soon as Connor misses time, Benson is a weekly starter for every fantasy team that rosters him. Much like Marshawn Lloyd, he would be an RB1 if Connor were to miss time. We're fading an older running back, and we're taking the explosive rookie behind him, a tale as old as time in fantasy football. Number 5, Blake Corum. Blake Corum lacks the Handcuff Plus usage. So you have to think about this structurally. If I want a guy who I can use right away, Benson and Lloyd, I think, are going to give you like that enough usage that you can use them as an in the pinch RB2 every single week. Blake Corum, on the other hand, I think is behind Kyren Williams to start the year. Kyren Williams was excellent last year under Sean McVay. And I think that the franchise wants Kyren Williams to be the man. Problem with Kyren Williams is he absorbed a ton of volume last season. He's 190 pounds, and he already is dealing with a foot injury. Few coaches get more out of their primary back than Sean McVay. So if Kyren Williams were to miss time, Blake Corum would be an unbelievable player for you to be able to plug into your starting lineup on your fantasy rosters. Blake Corum, of course, was the linchpin behind Michigan's national title run last year. This was an offense that featured Blake Corum every single game for multiple seasons. Corum was incredibly productive, gets drafted in the third round of the NFL draft, and lands with sort of a running back whisperer in Sean McVay, who's been able to get big-time running back production out of different types of running backs. You think about Todd Gurley, you think about Kyren Williams. Blake Corum, if he handled the load as the starting running back in LA, he would be highly productive. We're finally on to our top four. Number 4 for me, Tyjae Spears. Absolutely a handcuff plus. Somewhere in the multiverse, the Titans don't sign Tony Pollard, and Tyjae Spears' ADP is like in fuego right now. People are head over heels to draft him. But even with Pollard around, Spears can thrive. Caught 52 passes as a rookie, and he ran for 4.5 yards per carry. The 52 catches as a rookie is significant. You're talking about sort of what Rachaad White did in his rookie year before his ascension in year 2. Spears is a very good player. The backfield screams split. So I think that both Pollard and Spears are going to be guys that are getting weekly touches. But with Tyjae Spears' explosiveness and receiving ability, this is a guy that not only is a handcuff plus, but if Tony Pollard were to miss time, Tyjae Spears would be an RB1. Really talented player. And the scheme change in Tennessee is also very beneficial to Spears, where they're going to pass the ball in Tennessee a lot more than some people think. Now we get to the final top 3. And a couple of these guys are going to be like, hey, Theo, these are not really real handcuffs. But again, we are referencing ADP here. And these running backs are all being drafted as the second running back on their own team. Number 3 overall for me, Jaylen Warren. Jaylen Warren would be a handcuff plus. Certainly. This is a really good player. Finished as RB22 overall last year in PPR and outscored Najee Harris. Last year, we saw Jaylen Warren catch over 60 passes. Really talented receiver, really talented runner. If Najee Harris were to miss time, Warren could go absolutely nuclear. This is sort of the next Austin Eckler, Tony Pollard. It was Melvin Gordon. It was Zeke Elliott. It's sort of like a got to get past the bigger, stronger back who gets a lot of carries, and then this player has his big-time fantasy season. I think Jaylen Warren could beat his ADP this year by several rounds. He's going to benefit from Arthur Smith's RB-friendly scheme regardless of what Najee Harris does. We also look at the improvements that Pittsburgh made on the offensive line in the NFL draft. I love Jaylen Warren. Make him part of your draft plan, especially right now when drafters are drafting Najee Harris ahead of him. Harris has failed to meet ADP expectations for 2 straight seasons, and Pittsburgh did not pick up his 5th-year option. So there's a lot of people on Najee Harris, but I will be on Jaylen Warren. Number 2 overall. This is obviously a guy that you can use because last year he finished as RB2 overall, and that's Raheem Mostert. Raheem Mostert is older. It's almost absurd that I'm ranking him, again, RB2 overall last year, but he's being drafted well behind De'Von Achane. And Raheem Mostert is a guy where the knock on him early in his career is he couldn't stay on the field. But under Mike McDaniel, he's had no problem staying on an NFL field and thriving. This Miami offense is potent. You can start 2 running backs. 2 running backs from Miami will be startable no matter who's out on the field. So De'Von Achane, Raheem Mostert, both of these guys are going to be starters in fantasy. And stay tuned because we're going to talk about another Miami running back a little later. So Raheem Mostert comes in at number 2 overall on this list. again, if De'Von Achane somehow got injured in the preseason, I think Mostert would move up and up several rounds from where he's going in redraft. The only knock on Mostert is age. This is an older back. Anytime you invest in an older running back, you're taking in on some risk because Father Time is undefeated. And once an older running back loses it, they usually lose it pretty quickly. But Mostert showed no signs of slowing down last year. In fact, he played the best football of his entire career. And this Miami offense might lead the entire NFL in scoring. And another offense that could challenge Miami for number 1 overall this year is Detroit. And our number 1 player on this list is David Montgomery. David Montgomery is a player that was excellent last year. He averaged 14.8 points per game in PPR. And right now he's being selected as a mid-level RB2. So he's not cheap. And again, this is almost like a co-starters scenario. David Montgomery can absolutely be your RB2 in your draft plan this year, and you can feel very good about it. The Ben Johnson offense has had back-to-back seasons of supporting 2 running backs. We saw it a couple of years back where Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift both finished as RB2s or better. And last year we saw it with Gibbs and Montgomery. David Montgomery, if Jahmyr Gibbs were to miss time and David Montgomery was healthy, this would be a weekly RB1. Detroit has finished 5th in the NFL in points per game for back-to-back seasons under Ben Johnson as offensive coordinator. This year, they're older. They have a great offensive line. Jared Goff has been extended. Detroit might go absolutely nuclear this year, and Detroit might lead the NFL in scoring. David Montgomery, number 1 on our list. Despite his inflated price tag, I think he's worth being part of your draft plan. And I have a bonus player here. A bonus player is, we didn't talk about any real RB3s, but there's one RB3 that you should make part of your draft plan, and that is Jalen Wright of the Miami Dolphins. This is a unique case where an RB3 is somebody we want to consider drafting. Miami's offense is just so good that we know there will be multiple running backs that we can plug into our lineup every week. And Jalen Wright has multiple contingent upside paths. If De'Von Achane goes down, Jalen Wright steps right in. If Raheem Mostert goes down, Jalen Wright steps right in. And we have to remember, there's also a chance that Jalen Wright just earns touches himself because this is a player that is very good at football. 1,000-yard runner at Tennessee, an incredibly fast 40 time, sub 4.4 speed for Jalen Wright. And this is a guy who the Miami Dolphins selected in the 4th round, but they traded a 2025 third rounder to go up and get him. So they value Jalen Wright, and you should as well. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you smash that like button and make sure you're subscribed here to Player Profiler. We're dropping videos like this that are going to help you win in fantasy this year. Check out my podcast, First Class Fantasy, Press Coverage, Sonic Truth, and of course, Dynasty Life. This was a lot of fun. If you want to read the article version of this video, it's at playerprofiler.com. And I'll be updating these rankings as we move along this season. So this has definitely been a long one, but appreciate you sticking to the end, and we'll see you soon.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.